Hello, we are live now. We are live for the Chapter 8 recap. Chapter 8, Kettle and Wake, came out last week on the Tuesday Night Fiction audiobook podcast. Until the Bold Alone, welcome. Welcome, as we are about to discuss the events of Chapter 8. We're about to prepare you for the final two chapters of Crimson River coming out over the next couple of weeks, leading up to Book 2, Crystallize. As we continue on in the Civilands series, we're not stopping. I don't think I'm going to do a season 2 break, but I'm still considering my options there. I might do a short one at most, but otherwise I think we're going to go straight on to season 2 straight after season 1 ends, at least for now. Might do a break at the end of book 2 and not do one at the end of book 1. I don't know yet. Figuring it out as we go. As I've mentioned before, new to this podcasting thing, so going to do what feels right. We'll see. Maybe we'll be in need of a break, maybe not. Anyway, let's get into Chapter 8, Kettle and Wake, because it's one of my favorites from book 1. It's one that really sets the tone for the series, and that's why it's one of my favorites, because before this chapter, we don't really see quite the darkness, I guess, that lurks in the Murrieta. And in chapter 1, I mean, obviously we have a girl being chased through the woods. It's pretty dark, but it gets real gritty in this one. And from places where you wouldn't exactly expect it, and you end up realizing that the characters are gray, that this world is gray, and that it's not just the good guys versus the bad guys. People aren't making all decisions that they maybe end up looking back on fondly, and we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about Vultures, because that's the idea of this chapter. That's the idea of this recap, is Vultures. I think we're going to title it About Vultures. That's the working title. But anyway, to get into what occurs in Chapter 8. So we start off with Colin and Daniel. Colin having just fought with his arch rival Dominic, Jeannie, and their crew. And they have a little bit of a rumble. Colin hunts them down, essentially, by the bridge leading to the mountain lands, and threatens the life, really, of Jeannie, which he wasn't supposed to. That was directly against Daniel's orders. The Keegan gang are not exactly the most reliable, as we see from this experience and also the fire at the Morel home. There is definitely a lack of control that Daniel thinks he has, but clearly doesn't. And it stems here from the rivalry, like I said, between Dominic and Colin. So Colin now regrouping in Huron after failing to kill Dominic, shooting at him across the field and missing his two partners, getting mauled by Hans's grizzlies. And he comes back pretty battered. Daniel doesn't even recognize him. And he probably doesn't even recognize himself at this point. This is not something that Colin has experienced in his life. Dominic embarrassed him, and he's not happy about that. But he's also on a kind of a vengeance high. And that's another theme kind of in this chapter, is being on a vengeance high. And it's a dangerous, dangerous thing. And right off the bat from chapter 1, like I said, when we have Jeannie running away in the woods, it kind of sets the stage for a vengeance plot. Right? And we'll see that in not all cases. I mean, in some cases, people seek vengeance. In some cases, people don't. In some cases, it makes sense. In some cases, it doesn't. And we'll go into each specific example. But here for Colin, he's just determined to get Dominic in whatever way he can and make his life miserable in whatever way he can, because of the embarrassment when they were leaving Huron, when Dominic blew fire in his face and then knocked him out. And on the other hand, we see in part 2 that Dominic is somewhat regretful about not having killed Colin when he had the chance. Dominic suffers from this from this inner battle about murder and morality, and struggling through that from his time when he was in gangs and he was asked to kill, and it wasn't something that he liked or wanted to partake in again or be a part of. So he left, he ran away, and he came to Haran where life was better. And now he's thrust back into it, and it's a rough thing to have to decide, even in terms of protecting the ones you love. It's still murder, it's still not easy, and he struggles through that with this whole book. He struggles with killing Jesse Billings when he had to, and now he struggles with the opposite of not killing a potentially extremely dangerous Colin McCormick. So anyway, Colin comes back to town, catches up with Daniel, fills Daniel in that the Morells are alive, and more than just one. Harrison Morell is also alive. Jeannie and Harrison obviously are together with Hansa and Dominic. And now the Keegan gang knows this. Now the Keegan gang knows that it wasn't just Jeannie that survived the fire. And they're going to be hot on their trails if possible. Obviously now they're pretty deep into the mountain land. So Daniel sends Colin south to William to give him the news of that the Morells survived. Because Daniel knows that going into the mountain lands for now would be a waste, right? They wouldn't find them. They're not equipped to go into the mountain lands, and they don't have the people in Haran to run right after them, to get hot on their trail. So obviously Colin, being obsessed with vengeance, hates this. He doesn't want to go. He won't stop. He won't leave Daniel alone to try to get him to allow him to go north and hunt them down. But eventually he concedes because Daniel promises him that if he fulfills this request at some point, he'll have his opportunity. So Colin, with the help of the young Frankie Covington, begin their travel south. And again, when you get obsessed with vengeance, when it becomes too much to resist, it's like any drug, right? It's like any drug, and we can see through Colin's battered face and his distraction with Dominic so much that he won't even get his face repaired, which is completely just like beat down almost beyond recognition. We can see that thirst is within him for sure. And speaking of which, I mean, this weekend I just rewatched the movie Law Abiding Citizen, and to relate it kind of to that actually, which this is completely unplanned, but yeah, having just rewatched that movie, that's the story of the main character in that movie. His wife and daughter die, but it becomes about more than just avenging them for him. He kills their murderers in various ways, but it's not just about killing their murderers. It's about getting retribution for what allows their murderers to go free. But then once he does that, he still can't stop. You know, he ends up. It's funny. Somewhere towards the middle of the movie, they introduce this mayor of the city, which I believe the actress's name is Viola Davis or something. I really don't remember if that's who it is. It might be. But anyway, they introduce her character towards the end of the movie, and she had nothing to do with this guy's family dying or the culprits getting away. She had nothing to do with it. But he still wanted her dead. And because he still, in his mind, she still had involvement just by being a part of the system, right? Just by being a part of the system that allowed his family's killers to get away. And we see that he doesn't stop. There's no stopping this man. He will go out and even if he gets away with Viola Davis's murder and fixing and quote unquote fixing the system, breaking the wheel, as Daenerys, pathetic Targaryen would describe it. It will never be enough. Next he'll go on to the president. Next he'll burn the world to the ground. And that's what vengeance does. If you get too wrapped up in vengeance, you lose sight of who you are and everything that makes the world good, and you reject the purity in the world. And I thought that was a really cool kind of message to take from that movie. Again, is that, of course, you like seeing the murderers die, right? You like seeing It's great. It's great to see like the man who murdered and raped this guy's wife and killed his daughter, like get all of his limbs cut off. Any person, nobody would shed a tear for that guy, but at the same time, you have to just let the state kind of do its work. You have to let the system do its work, because if you don't, you end up losing everything that makes you better and makes you good and allows you to function as a human being in the world. You lose track of your whole mind by doing that. And that's kind of what's happening with Colin. So Colin is obsessed now with Dominic. It's an attachment, and it's like a purpose, and it's not good to have that kind of a thing as your purpose. It's not good to have vengeance as a purpose, because you don't have anything yourself. There's nothing that's driving yourself. It's just an obsession with another person, and an obsession with besting another person. You're not creating anything. And we're going to get more into that too. We're going to get more into why creating things is the greatest gift a human can have, and why vultures create nothing. And we'll get to that. So anyway, that's part one. I think that's everything for part one. Basically, them getting caught up and Colin starting on south. Daniel is all happy. And Daniel is exploring Haran himself. He's kind of, feeling it out a little bit, if you know what I mean. He's talking to the barmaid, meets Joanna Fontaine, who is the barmaid, and he's flirting. He's doing his thing. He's getting to know people. He's wheeling and dealing, and that's what Daniel does. Anyway, so on to part two. Like I said, we have the comrades, Dominic, Jeannie, Harrison, and Hansa. They're going north into the mountains now. They've crossed the bridge. They've gone through their harrowing experience crossing the bridge. And on the way, they also have an interesting conversation. So there's two things in this conversation I want to talk about. So Hansa has a discussion, and Hansa being the only native within the group. This is the first place we kind of start to explore with not just the villains, but also with the good guys, quote unquote, what is the morality of Easterners traveling into this territory that they're not from, where the natives live, right? And this is where, again, like one of the main themes of this fantasy series is manifest destiny, is this desire to travel. And to me, it's more than just thinking that this place is your destiny to take it, right? Because it's not all. Again, the world is gray. It's not black and white. The people who go out into the world aren't evil, even though they're creating their own place on someone else's home. I mean, it's black and white. And one of the biggest reasons that contributes to that is something that Dominic and Harrison mentioned to Hansa, as Hansa is questioning why they come here. Because in Hansa's eyes, and logically so, if even a few of the Easterners are violent, and even if even a few are greedy, then it would be preferable for none of them to be there. And there's not really much that the natives can do about it. They can't sacrifice. I mean, they could sacrifice their own moral code and just eliminate all the Easterners, but they put what. Since the Vahani, most of the Vahani apparently have pride. They're a prideful people. They're not going to sacrifice their morals. He just wonders, why do you guys have to come at all? And he wonders this despite the fact that they're his allies. I mean, they've demonstrated clearly that they're his allies. But it's still a question as he loses his father, and now his sister is traveling south without him, with their people. And it's a struggle. It's a tough point for him. And before I get into the why, I just want to say too, like, this is with the first 5 or 6 chapters. I think this is where I first started to kind of realize like what it is that makes dialogue good, right? Because this was the first book I wrote. There's a lot that I struggle with going back and reading it and just thinking like, wow, I've come a long way. And again, it's more of a good thing than a bad thing to realize that you've come a long way. And I think it'll be a cool thing if you do read the series, like seeing from book 1 to book 4 how much that improves. But introducing conflict within a group of allies is the first kind of place where I kind of saw like the benefits of just having conflict everywhere, right? And it's a story. Conflict needs to be in the story, otherwise what's the resolution? Anyway, so when it comes to why they justify them going to the west, the reasoning is honestly my own, a lot of my own, when it comes to why I don't like cities. And it's pretty cool, like, to actually explore the depths of your own subconscious reasoning, because it's something that I didn't really explore until I started writing, whether it was writing music or writing books, of why don't I like the city? Why am I drawn away from New York City, which is New York is my hometown. I'm not from the city, but I was never drawn to New York City. I always was repelled by it. I can't stand how populous and like filthy it is, and it's just old. And it just, while there is some aesthetic beauty, I suppose, in what's being built there, what the problem is that it is hard to impossible for the average person to imagine continuing to build upon it. And that's the point that Dominic makes in discussing this with Hansa, is that, again, as we talked about before, creation is man's greatest gift, is woman's greatest gift, is humanity's greatest gift. You can't advance through life without creating, whether it's creating children or creating books or creating a house or creating a family or you just always have to be creating, or else you lose sight, you become nihilistic, you lose track of everything. You know, when I first moved to Houston, that was my biggest thing, is I just wasn't creating anything. Wealth, sure, but like, what if you're not doing anything with wealth? It's meaningless. You can't. I mean, you could build like a castle with dollars, I guess. That honestly might satisfy your creative itch, right? If you just want to build a castle with dollars, but if you're not building upon something or building something from scratch, it's hard to just find any meaning at all. And for a lot of people, as Dominic mentions, coming to the West isn't about conquering. It isn't about greed. It's just I mean, in a way it kind of is, but in all the same way, some greed isn't bad, right? In some ways, greed to create is good. If I'm greedy, I go get land, right? And then I can, on that land, build a home, raise a family, build a garden, do whatever, right? And that's kind of become like a purpose for me at this point. You know, my grandpa, in recent days, it's probably like it's a combination of listening to people who encourage this lifestyle and who live that lifestyle, but my like new goal, because I explored my inner mind on this kind of stuff from writing chapters like this one, where I thought about it, the more and more I thought about it is again, it's kind of cool to be close to a city, but it's not cool to not be able to build. If you can't build, if you can't create, life is meaningless. And when I looked back on the people who I've looked up to in my life, one of the things I thought about was my grandpa, who had he had a garden with cucumbers and tomatoes, and it was just this small little thing, like on the side of his old house, but it was like his, and he was making his food and he was eating it for his family. Like, if I remember right, I think they were like using the carrots and the celery, or maybe celery, I don't know, but they were using what they were making in like soup and stuff. And it's like that is purpose, that is building, that is creating, that is cultivating. And that's why we're here, is to build and create. And it's hard, again, when you're in the middle of a city. Like, imagine living in New York City. Like, how would you make a garden? Where would you make a garden? You could do it. I'm not saying you can't, but it's like, for most people, it's just not a place where you can envision any further build. I mean, why would you even want it? There's so much built there already. And to just build on top of it isn't the same as to build something from scratch. And that's, again, I guess for me, why I am just so repulsed by like remakes. Oh my God. You know, it's just like, I don't know how any writer could feel any value at all. And I know that they don't out of remakes. And that's the only reason why I kind of am starting to understand why the guys who made Game of Thrones like kind of wrote it in, because it's like, who cares? We didn't do it. Like, we didn't build this. This isn't our thing. I immediately lose that understanding when I realize that they're making Star Wars next. Why not just make your own show? And I think they tried to do that actually, but it got canceled. Now that I think about it, I think they tried to do like a show about the Confederacy. It was like called Confederate, but then people were like, it's offensive, so they didn't let them do it, which is insanity. Nothing good will ever be made if we live that way all the time, but it is what it is. And again, it just goes back to creating and finding a need to build and create. That's like why we go west. That's why we do what we do. That's why we listen to the Tuesday Night Fiction podcast, why we join the Civil Gang, because we want to make gardens. And that's what we're doing here. We're building a garden. And one of these days, you know, because I'm going to have this, this podcast is going to go on as long as I can imagine it going, which at least for now is the length of the series, which I think is going to be about like 52 or 53 chapters. So that means we have at least 104 episodes to air of this. One day I'm going to fill you in on my garden. I'm going to let you know how my garden's going. And right now the books are my garden, but I'm going to have cucumbers. I'm going to have beans. I'm going to be growing a lot of shit. Excuse me. I'm going to be growing a lot of stuff in my garden, and it's going to be fantastic. Anyway, so that's the conversation that kind of goes down between Dominic and Hansa. And it's an interesting one, and it's one that will be continued to be explored through the rest of the series. Are the innocent Easterners actually innocent? Is anyone actually innocent? But they continue on north. The winter is starting to pick up. The winds and the snow starting to really come down, and their lack of provisions since the attack by Colin is starting to catch up with them. It's starting to hurt. They have a ways to go, and they're just kind of going uphill one day at a time, and it's taken a while. And eventually they get attacked by a pack of wolves. And we see Dominic's skills again as he throws down the smoke bomb. Jeannie's fear kind of causes a mishap. It causes a miscalculation. Dominic wanted to have the smoke be a better distraction, but that didn't work out all that well because Jeannie reacted. And it caused Hansa to get caught up in the attack. He got his arm chewed out by a wolf and gets kind of knocked out by the end of this chapter, and Jeannie responds to it. She's obviously very upset, but she did protect him in the end and kill the wolf that was going after him in the end. Otherwise, though, very dangerous attack. And Dominic, we once again see he's a man of many talents with his smoke bomb. But on to part 3. And part 3 is where it gets dark. Again, when I was writing Crimson River, I wasn't in really like a dark place anymore, but I had experiences of things that I just perceived to be real life, things that were catalysts for change. And you don't change without failure. You don't move on and grow without failure. You have to earn the 4th and 5th books. You have to earn the ability to understand what makes a character overcome. You know, it's hypocritical. It's not like if I was to try to write these when I was 20, they would suck because I didn't even know what it meant to overcome, really. I mean, I had people around me that things happened to, but nothing that I had to emotionally overcome some things. I mean, I've talked about my mom having cancer. There's things that I've had to overcome, but there's not any, it wasn't inner demons. It was fear for other people, right? And sometimes you do things that are wrong. The best stories are not just man versus nature. The best stories involve man versus man as well. And here is where we start to see things get real dark. So Latera, who's traveling south with her people from the Riverlands, is just surrounded by betrayal. I mean, Elon, she gets really close to, and he is leading her people to the Tokali hold, and he just becomes super distant. He just as the closer they get, the more the danger that they get in. Elon starts to realize that it's just not going to work out between them. His people aren't kind to others. He knows his parents probably won't accept a relationship between them, and he just grows pretty distant, and he gets fearful because, I mean, he is pretty young. This is an admission that he thought he was ready for, and he's just not sure anymore, and he's scared. And fear will do that to you. Fear will it'll make you do things to other people you didn't want to do. And again, this is, direct experience. I'm not going to go into it, but I've hurt people as much as people have hurt me. And I think most people have been through both and done both, but just maybe didn't realize it. And all you could do is try to not do that by not lying to yourself about a variety of things. But in Elon's case, the lies became too much, and he just realizes I can't be there for Latera, and that's what kind of leads to her quote unquote betrayal by her friend, right? And then on the other hand, the councilman, in a more obvious betrayal, right, killed her father. And Castor has been all over the place about this. Castor was one of Arcuta's best friends. He was one of his closest confidants. And he's realizing he's lied to himself about his experiences, about what makes the most sense, about what the best course of action is. And he's just so lost in just that web that it just feels like to him that he's learned nothing over the course of his entire life. And maybe he hasn't learned anything. You know, I mean, when you act in the way he acted, you have to be able to accept the moral repercussions of it. You need to be able to accept and know how to move forward from by acknowledging the existence of your immorality, what you did wrong. And Castor is just a mess. He's just a mess by this point. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know where he's going or why. He has no why anymore. He talked about the story of the man in the mountains with Latera and Elon, who jumped off the cliff but didn't die. That he realized the value of his life, but in Castor's case, he says his case is the opposite. Castor lost the value of life by acting in a way that was against his own morals. And you can come back from that. People can come back from that. They can find the right path, but Castor, he won't. And Latera sees that because he's a vulture at this point. Castor became a parasite. And parasites, they can't give back. They can't give anything back. They can only take. And in his case, even if he accepts, he's not a psychopath. He accepts that he did something wrong, but he's just so, again, buried, just buried in his shame and misery that there's no coming back for him. He's not a man anymore. He's nothing. And he knows that. He just accepts that. And that's the problem. You can't accept that. You can't accept, if you accept that you're a coward, you're a fucking coward. And in his case, he becomes the same as the parasites, the same as the vultures. He is one. And that's why when he commits suicide, there's no more fitting circumstance in Laterra's mind than for the vultures to just feast upon him. Because that's what he did to her and to her father. The vultures, they swarm overhead in a kettle and a wake. Which, fun fact, so kettle and wake refers to formations of vultures. And if I remember right, I think the kettle is when they're kind of like circling overhead, so like a group of circling vultures. And then a wake is, I believe, when they're all swirling down and coming down, right? All coming upon their meal. And Castor is brought back to his people, essentially. The vultures take away any evidence other than his bones of his existence, right? She doesn't want any part of him. She doesn't want him to be there. She doesn't want to see him anymore. And she sends the birds down to be with one of their own. Because Castor is a fucking vulture. And she gives him a chance. She doesn't tell him to kill himself. She doesn't say he needs to. He apologizes. He hopes that she accepts his apology. But what has he done to earn that? What has he done to earn that forgiveness? Nothing. He's been a blank slate, a wimp the whole way down, just wallowing in his misery and his shame. And she sees that, and she says, why? She doesn't say it. She's just silent before he pulls the trigger. But it's just, you know what you need to do. You want my forgiveness? You know what you need to do. Will you be a man, or will you continue to be a fucking vulture and just kettle and wake and spin around and just suck energy and positivity and strength? Men don't do that. But that's exactly what Castor and the other councilmen did to her family, to her dad. They kettled and they waked and they ripped his bones apart. And now they suffer for it. And that's what Castor does. He's a coward. And there is cowardice in all suicide. Because you can make a difference. And you choose not to. And that's a tough thing. It's not easy to say that. It's not easy to... You don't disrespect the dead, but like the amount of positive impact you can have on your own life and on other people's lives and the strength that exists out there, towering away from that is not, it doesn't make you strong. It doesn't make you, there's no pity for that. You know, they're not at the hold yet. They haven't reached the hold. Their journey from the north to the south has been a grueling one, and the people are struggling through it. They're hungry. They're thirsty. They're tired. You're a leader. You're one of the councilmen. You lead. And he just doesn't do that. And he cowers out, and he puts the gun to his head, and he pulls the trigger, and that's it. And again, in a symbol both to Elon, so Elon, like what leads up to them finding Castor in the field is Elon says he wants to tell Laterra the truth. He says he wants to talk to her. After already talking to her a couple times and admitting in so many words how much of a coward he's been, or was, or is. He doesn't want to be friends. He doesn't want any of it because he's just scared. He's just a scared little boy. And now is his chance again. Because he's, again, what are you, a vulture or not, Elon? That's what she's looking to find out. And so they go and they stumble upon Castor before Elon has his chance to speak to her about whatever it was he wanted to speak to her about. And in a show as much to Castor as to Elon, we see the suicide and we see the vultures come down and just pick apart Castor limb by limb. And it's a message to him too. It's a message to Elon too. It's like, what are you going to do? Are you going to be a man? Are you going to be accountable? Are you going to stand up for anything at all? And as we see at the end afterwards, Elon is just too broken. He's too shocked by what he's seen. He's too sick by what he's seen that he just gives in. He just doesn't, he can't speak anymore. He whatever truth he thought he was ready to tell, he just isn't anymore. And again, Laterra's just surrounded by these people. And to her, one less, like what dignity does Castor deserve, right? And I want to be clear. We go back to the movie I was talking about. This is an act of vengeance for her. This is an act of pure vengeance. And she could have just left his body there. She could have just not buried it. She did just let happen what was meant to happen. But summoning those vultures was an act of vengeance. And we're going to start to see, again, like I said, throughout the whole series, what those kind of acts lead to in a person's mind. So going forward, this is definitely one of the biggest scenes in Laterra's growth. And I'll say that in this book, up to this point, we have this scene and we have the scene with the fireworks, right? We have the scene in the beginning with the fireworks where Dominic and Hansa launch this divertive attack, where she at that time is just freaking out, right? She loses her mind. She's this small girl in this big world now that's much bigger than she ever knew it was before, with this Tokali kid from the south, which she's never seen this clan at all, ever. And it hits her. It all hits her and just crashes down on her, right? It's like this, everything, it's so much bigger than she could have ever imagined, and that's terrifying. That's terrifying. And in the midst of an attack, she freaks out. She's horrified. She's lost. Because she never cared about any of this stuff. She was just closed off to it. But now we see in chapter 8 the kind of journey that she's gone through and how ruthless it makes her. How just strong in one sense and just ruthless in another, again. And that is all part of the journey as well. And whether that will lead down into a pit of nihilism and anger, or it will be its own catalyst for change, is yet to be seen. And it will be seen, and it could lead either way, right? You could learn to close yourself off again. You could learn, like, wow, I don't like this world. I don't want the world to be bigger. I just want it to be smaller. And you could go back and shrink it and just be part of your community again. Or you could say, this power is just, I finally found it. I finally found this power, and you could just keep going with it and get darker and darker. Or you could learn that the power, yet you have power. Now I know I have power, but it's scary, and I need to learn to control it. Or there's all these different paths that this could lead to. And I'm, again, writing this chapter, it was my favorite because it's the first in 5 books and it leads to a lot of different things that happen in the next book and just onward. The ripple effect of events like this are immense, very immense. And yeah, so again, vultures, avoid the vultures, right? Find the people that suck the energy out of you and run far away. And try not to, again, vengeance is a scary thing. But don't be a parasite. And that'll do it for the recap. I would like to talk about the status of book 4. So, it's done. The manuscript for book 4 is finally done. Everything's ready to go. Again, as I mentioned last week, my cover guy broke his arm, wrist, whatever. He broke the only thing that he needed in order to work through his job. So I'm kind of just playing a waiting game right now. He does the cover and the interior, so pretty necessary. But because my cover guy broke his wrist, now we're just kind of waiting. And once he's ready to go again, I will be able to get right back into it. It'll be a quick process because everything is ready. The manuscript is ready. Book 4 is ready to go. So, what I'm going to do, once my cover designer comes back and works through the remainder of the cover and interior, the book will be ready to go. I'm not going to release the book probably until a month or so, maybe more, maybe not. About a month after that point. Once the book is final, I'm going to release it a month later. However, when the book is final, what I am going to do is do a massive giveaway. I'm going to give away all 4 books in the series to 10 people. 40 books to 10 people. I would greatly appreciate reviews. That would be fantastic if you enjoy them. And it's all going to be on Instagram. So I'm going to do an Instagram post where I just ask you to comment, tag a person who likes to read. So keep an eye out for that in the coming weeks. That is not this. I don't know. I might make this part of the video into an Instagram. That's not what this is. This is not the giveaway post, but this is where I'm giving the announcement that there will be one very, very soon, hopefully. But again, as soon as it's ready, it'll be, those people will get the series, the full series, a month before book 4 is even ready. And they will get book 4 also. So it's going to be a big deal. The books will all be signed. I'm very excited about it. Book 4 is, I'm pumped, okay? I'm very, very pumped. Let me read, I'll give you as a little bonus today, my editorial review. This is from my editor. So real quick, nothing is quite what it seems in the world of the Murrieta, and the events that unfold in Cryptic Kingdom are no exception. In this penultimate installment of the series, the tension is palpable as N.B. Austin's signature twists deliver more shock than ever. Bringing together some of the series' most beloved and prominent characters, the novel sets the stage for the ultimate conclusion. Hold on to your seats. And hold on to your seats you should, because Cryptic Kingdom is epic. Epic. And I'm so excited to release it. And I'm so excited to just give it away because free books are the best books. Free books are the best books. And they will be signed. You will have signed copies on the day of reckoning. So welcome to the Civil Gang. Thanks for listening in all this time. Thanks for listening in if you're new. If you are new, though, you shouldn't be listening to this. You should be listening along to episode 1. This is a series. Please listen to it in order. If not, I probably just spoiled everything for you, so sorry. Not sorry, though. It's your fault because you didn't really pay attention. But you should still start with episode 1. The chapters are awesome. They're only heating up. They're getting more musical. more sound effects. I'm getting more in the habit of making them week after week after week. I love podcasting. It's a lot of fun. Please join the journey. It's a ton of fun, and it's a good time, and you'll learn a little bit of something along the way. I hope. I think I did while I was writing it, and I hope you do while you're reading it, and I hope you like it, and if you do, tell me about it. I would love to hear your thoughts. For The Bold Alone, thanks for listening in. This has been Nicholas Austin, episode 16. Talk to you again next week with Chapter 9. 2 chapters left in Crimson River.